In a groundbreaking moment that echoed across the seas, we recently witnessed the grand unveiling of China's third marvel, the Fujian supercarrier. Being a beacon of technological prowess, this aircraft carrier has elevated onto the global stage. This signified China's resolute commitment to expanding its maritime dominance in the Pacific. The goal was to compete with the newly launched U.S. Navy's Gerald supercarrier and assert China's position on the global stage. But how does the Fujian supercarrier compare to the USS Gerald supercarrier? Does it have the technological capabilities needed for modern sea fleets? And what's the battle plan for deploying and using the Fujian supercarrier in combat? Join us as we dive into the world of naval technology, exploring the basic features of China's brand new aircraft carrier and how it compares with the USS Gerald supercarrier. Fujian supercarrier versus Gerald supercarrier. Let's kick off by having a brief overview of both carriers. The Fujian supercarrier was actually named after Fujian province. It's the third aircraft carrier of the Chinese aircraft carrier program and the first of the Type 003 class. It is China's first catapult aircraft carrier with a fully indigenous design, an integrated propulsion system, and 3 electromagnetic catapults. Well, this is unlike the skyjump flight decks of the previous Chinese aircraft carriers. Switching gears to the Ford supercarrier, we have to acknowledge the fact that the United States has been in the game of naval technology for a long time, though China has been rapidly progressing over the past decade. This class of aircraft carriers was actually named after former United States President Gerald Ford. It is also referred to as the largest and most powerful ship in NATO's maritime arsenal. Being the first in a new class of supercarriers, the Ford uses electromagnetic catapults to launch jets, breaking with the steam-powered system used by carriers for decades. This new system requires fewer sailors to operate, and its power levels can be calibrated for specific aircraft, leading to less wear and tear and lower long-term maintenance costs. Comparing the Fujian supercarrier to the Gerald supercarrier would mean that we have to look at the basic features of these supercarriers. Then, we can know for sure which is better than the other. Design. When making comparisons about carriers, you need to commence with the design. That's a significant factor to consider in the aspect of naval technology. As for the Fujian aircraft carrier, we could say that they are a significant achievement in China's development of supercarriers. But hey, credit goes to the skilled workers at Jiangnan Shipyard, located on an island in the Yangtze River near Shanghai. Having been known for crafting many of China's powerful surface combatants, including modern air warfare destroyers, it took about 6 years for Jiangnan Shipyard to build the Fujian supercarrier. Meanwhile, modern warships are typically built in parts using a modular approach. And the Fujian's supercarrier followed this method, with its modules crafted indoors in a controlled environment starting in 2016. In the year 2020, the ship then started taking shape within the dry dock, and this process continued for approximately 2 years. The launch day was a big moment for the Type 003 carrier, officially named the Fujian. Well, this name carries more than a nautical significance. It also sends a subtle political message to Taiwan, honoring the mainland province across the Taiwan Strait. Looking forward, the Fujian is set to start active service in 2024 when it gets commissioned. Now, let's shift gears and talk about the heavyweight in the United States Navy's lineup, the Gerald Ford. This isn't just a ship, it's the pioneer of a fleet of 10 nuclear supercarriers, aiming to take the reins from the long-standing Nimitz-class carriers. The Nimitz has been holding it down since 1975, but the plan is to gradually retire the first couple of ships over the next decade. The Ford was built by the Newport News Shipbuilding Company, the only shipyard in the United States exclusively tasked with designing and constructing aircraft carriers. They're also the go-to spot for refueling the nuclear reactors of these supercarriers. Likewise, back in the 70s, they even built the nuclear-powered cruisers of the U.S. Navy called the Virginia class. Now let's talk about upgrades. The Ford class addresses important shortcomings observed in the Nimitz class. One notable issue with the Nimitz was its limited ability to incorporate new technology throughout the 21st century, partly due to constraints in its internal structure. In the past, upgrading the Nimitz involved extensive modifications to the existing deck structure, a process that proved both time-consuming and costly. Additionally, the Nimitz struggled to generate sufficient electrical power to support advanced technologies like new radars and combat management systems. The Ford was purposefully designed with these challenges in mind. Its flexible infrastructure allows for the seamless integration of new capabilities as they emerge, streamlining the modernization process. Unlike the Nimitz, the Ford boasts a more potent and compact set of nuclear reactors, producing 3 times the electrical power. Meanwhile, construction of the Ford officially commenced in 2009, and it reached significant milestones with its launch in 2013 and commissioning in 2017. The total construction cost amounted to an astounding $13 billion, excluding research and development expenses, solidifying its status as the most expensive warship ever constructed. Moving on to the displacement, there is a notable distinction between the Fujian and the Ford. Chinese media reported the Fujian's displacement to be over 80,000 tons on its launch day, presumably when fully loaded. Initially estimated between 85,000 and 100,000 tons based on satellite images, the Type 003's displacement raises some curiosity. In contrast, the Ford stands at approximately 100,000 tons, providing a benchmark for comparison. Examining dimensions, the Fujian spans about 316 meters in length at the deck level, featuring a width of 76 meters at its broadest point. The Ford, slightly longer at 337 meters, shares a comparable width with its Chinese counterpart. Moving beyond dimensions, the Ford class accommodates a total complement of around 4,500 individuals, including aircrew. Notably, this is a bit fewer than the Nimitz class, a reduction attributed to the Ford's enhanced automation capabilities. Electromagnetic catapults. Both the Fujian and the Ford aircraft carriers employ electromagnetic catapults for launching aircraft, a significant advancement over the steam catapults that the U.S. Navy had utilized since the 1950s. The electromagnetic catapult technology offers several advantages, such as the capability to handle a heavier launch weight and imposing less strain on the airframes. However, when comparing the catapult systems of the Fujian and the Ford, there are notable differences. The Chinese system operates on medium voltage direct current, while its American counterpart relies on alternating current. Generally, direct current is acknowledged for its higher energy efficiency and easier integration with energy storage devices for catapults. This makes direct current particularly suitable for conventionally powered ships with more limited energy derived from traditional power sources. On the other hand, energy efficiency becomes a lesser concern for nuclear-powered warships, such as the Ford class. While the Ford's use of alternating current for its catapults may be less efficient, it is deemed acceptable given the massive energy generation capabilities of the Ford. In terms of development cost, alternating current is more budget-friendly. However, the direct current system on the Fujian carrier represents a second-generation electromagnetic catapult, showcasing increased efficiency and advancements compared to the alternating current system on the Ford class. China may have taken a lead in catapult technology. An unrelated issue with the Ford's catapults is the absence of individual electrical isolation switches for each catapult. Instead, there is a need to disconnect all catapults simultaneously or none at all. This means that when one catapult requires resetting, repairs, or maintenance, all launch operations must come to a halt. It's highly likely that the Chinese engineers, in designing the Fujian, took measures to avoid replicating this specific flaw on the Ford class. The Fujian may incorporate 3 separate switches, one for each catapult, offering a more flexible and efficient arrangement. Aviation facilities. Now let's delve into the general aviation facilities on both carriers, beyond the catapults. Most sources indicate a similar deck area on both carriers, featuring an angled flight deck, with the Chinese carrier slightly smaller. Both carriers boast the island on the starboard side. During routine operations, the Type 003 Fujian is estimated to accommodate between 60 to 70 aircraft. In its early years post-commissioning, it is likely to carry only the J-15S, and due to their size, the air wing may lean toward the lower end of the estimate. Subsequently, with the introduction of the smaller J-35S, the Fujian will have the capacity to carry more fighters. While the exact composition of the air wing remains uncertain, it might consist of approximately 50 fixed-wing jet aircraft and around a dozen helicopters, primarily for anti-submarine purposes. In emergency situations or wartime scenarios, the Fujian is anticipated to carry significantly more aircraft, potentially reaching a maximum of 80 or even more. Similar to other Chinese carriers, the Type 003 Fujian is equipped with 2 aircraft elevators on the starboard side, facing the sea. Although fewer than the elevators on U.S. supercarriers, adding more elevators would compromise available deck space. When considering aircraft carrier capabilities beyond catapults, the number of elevators plays a crucial role. While an aircraft can be parked on an elevator, during sortie operations, the elevator is engaged, limiting the space for refueling and arming jet fighters. The Fujian, being somewhat smaller than a U.S. Navy supercarrier, opts for 2 elevators, a sensible choice that maintains a fully usable deck space. Additionally, the Fujian features 3 aircraft launch positions with catapults, 2 at the front and 1 in the middle. In contrast, the Ford, with a normal deployment capacity of 70 to 80 aircraft, showcases a more extensive layout. It includes 3 aircraft elevators, 1 on the port side and 2 on the starboard side. While more elevators improve sortie rates, the Ford deliberately has 1 less elevator than its predecessor, the Nimitz class, prioritizing advanced catapults. The Ford boasts 4 aircraft launch positions with catapults, 2 at the front and 2 in the middle. It's crucial to note that while additional elevators and catapults enhance sortie rates, each extra unit provides diminishing returns. The primary advantage lies in redundancy. In case of malfunction or battle damage, the carrier can continue operations with other functioning systems. The Ford's 11 advanced weapons elevators further augment its capabilities, streamlining the arming process. This feature is absent or unconfirmed on the Fujian, positioning the Ford as superior in naval aviation facilities, especially in terms of redundancy and sortie rates. Propulsion. Going further, the Fujian relies on conventional propulsion, whereas the Ford boasts nuclear propulsion. This fundamental difference significantly influences the operations and capabilities of the 2 ships. The Fujian employs integrated electric propulsion, supported by steam turbo generators as the primary electricity source. Meanwhile, integrated electric propulsion on a large warship offers several advantages. Firstly, it demands less space compared to traditional diesel or gas propulsion systems. More importantly, the system showcases remarkable versatility in power distribution. The integrated grid system efficiently manages the flow of energy to onboard systems, seamlessly shifting power supply from systems with low energy demand to those with high energy demand. This capability enhances power quality and effectively reduces the overall energy demand of the ship. The Type 003's integrated electric propulsion system is well suited for operating electromagnetic catapults, although not strictly necessary. This innovative propulsion technology demonstrates the adaptability and efficiency required for the dynamic needs of a modern aircraft carrier. Now let's talk about the power source behind these carriers. The Ford is packing a duo of Bechtel A-1B nuclear reactors, churning out a whopping 600 megawatts of electricity. That's 3 times the power of the Nimitz class, enough juice to light up a small city of around 150,000 people. The nuclear advantage gives the Ford a real edge over the Fujian's conventional power. Speaking of which, some might wonder if China really needs a nuclear carrier right now. Well, China's plan is to operate carriers within the second island chain, and for that, conventional power gets the job done. But there's a key difference in capability between conventional and nuclear power. The Ford doesn't need marine fuel. Sure, they have to restock supplies like food and ammo every 10 days or so, but the ship itself doesn't waste space for fuel. This nifty detail means that the replenishment ships sailing alongside the carrier group can stash all their fuel for the Ford's sidekicks, the Arleigh Burke destroyers. It's like a fuel-sharing party that significantly boosts the range of the whole carrier group, even if the destroyers are running on conventional power. Another cool perk is that the Ford doesn't have to lug around as much of its own fuel, freeing up more room for aviation fuel. Talk about efficiency! While specific figures for the Fujian and the Ford aren't readily available, we do have insights into the Nimitz class, which can tote around 3.5 million gallons of aviation fuel. Double that of the retired U.S. conventional carrier, the Kitty Hawk class, which carried 1.8 million gallons. It's a solid bet that the Ford can handle way more aviation fuel than the Fujian. What does this mean? Well, the Ford can keep those planes in the air for much longer, boosting its endurance in aviation operations. Zooming in on tactical prowess, the Ford has a leg up with a greater cruising speed and a hefty top speed, cruising along at over 30 knots. In a pinch, the Ford can even zip ahead of its escort ships, racing to the combat zone faster if the situation demands it. That's a nifty trick that a regular ship can't pull off. So, when you add it all up, nuclear power delivers not just an extended range, but also a beefed-up warfighting capability for the carrier battle group overall. Radars plus defensive armaments. Let's dive into a radar face-off between the two carriers, and trust me, there are some notable differences. The Ford is rocking a dual X and S bandwidth radar setup. It's got the Raytheon AN/SPY-3 multifunction radar working its magic in the X bandwidth and an AN/SPY-4 volume search radar holding it down in the S bandwidth. Both of these are top-notch active electronically scanned array systems, giving a serious upgrade over the radar systems on the Nimitz-class carriers. As for the Fujian, it's almost likely it'll be equipped with a radar featuring gallium nitride technology. We've seen this tech in action on the Type 55 destroyers with the Type 346B radar, and it's rocking the gallium nitride. Given the timeline, Fujian launched 5 years after the first Type 55 destroyer, it's pretty reasonable to expect a similar setup for the air search radar on the Fujian carrier. Perhaps, I know it might stir up a bit of controversy, but in many ways it's not that surprising. The Fujian was wrapped up much later than the Ford, giving it the luxury to incorporate all the latest and greatest tech. So, there's a solid belief that the Fujian's radar system might just outshine the ones on the later Ford-class ships. Now let's talk about radar bandwidths. The Type 346B radar on the Fujian's counterpart, the Type 55 destroyer, pulls off the dual bandwidth dance with an S and C band. The Fujian's spec is still under wraps, though. In the Ford's corner, it seems to sport a somewhat outdated radar mast, loaded up with external radar domes and satellite communication gadgets. On the flip side, the Fujian systems are sleek and compact, snuggling within the integrated radar mast. Sure, over time, more gizmos might find a home on the Fujian, but the Chinese carrier is rocking a more integrated mast game, reducing interference between sensors and boasting a lower radar cross-section. Plus, let's be real, the Fujian's mast just oozes modern and sleek vibes. It's like comparing a vintage flip phone to the latest smartphone. The Fujian takes the crown in the looks department. In terms of weaponry, the Ford is reportedly armed with advanced Sea Sparrow missiles for medium-range air defense and rolling airframe missiles for short-range air defense. Additionally, it is equipped with 3 Phalanx CWs close-in weapon systems for point defense. On the Fujian carrier, we have observed the presence of 4 new variants of the Type 1130 CW's autocannons. These autocannons are outfitted with what appears to be a novel ASA fire control radar. The Chinese carrier demonstrates impressive point defense capabilities. However, the extent of its medium-range capabilities is yet to be fully revealed, as it remains uncertain what additional systems will be installed on the Fujians. What's next for China's naval technology? When you check out one carrier, you'll spot a similar deal on the other. So, both the Fujian Supercarrier and the US Navy's Gerald R. Ford are top-notch warships, stealing the show in the tech department. Even though the Fujian plays it old school as a conventional carrier, it gives the Ford a run for its money in many aspects, as we've hashed out before. Now, what sets the Fujian apart is its snazzy second-gen electromagnetic catapult rocking the direct circuit installation. It's like the energy-efficient cousin of the Ford's catapults with their alternating circuits. The Fujian's tech perks aren't just for show, they show that they're a newer ship than the Ford, and also reflect the progress China has made in naval technology. But the Ford's got some serious aces up its sleeve. Thanks to its nuclear propulsion, the carrier group gets a way bigger range. Picture this. The replenishment vessel loads up on more fuel for the escorts. Plus, the Ford flexes with way more electricity output to keep its radars and combat systems in top gear, outlasting the Fujian in the stamina game. Skipping the fuel hassle also means more wiggle room for aviation fuel. Furthermore, the Ford comes with special weapons elevators that the Fujian hasn't unpacked yet. So, in my book, China's next aircraft carrier could up its game in two ways. Firstly, going nuclear on propulsion will supercharge the ship's war game, especially for flexing power in spots like the Indian Ocean. But hey, it still has some benefits for operations closer to home, for example within the second island chain. Secondly, the Type 004 carrier could use some extra naval aviation digs. More elevators and catapults compared to the Fujian would give it a boost, think added backup and battle damage resilience,